I'd like to pick up something from last week. And this is just a sort of small announcement, and I'd like feedback, which is much to a certain extent to my surprise, I was able to, so to speak, consolidate all the TechLive MF dist, the macros, the tech macros. I was able to consolidate all the tech macros for the last 10 or 11 years into a single Git repository. And the Git repository came out to be 205 megabytes, which in today's world is not very much at all. And I thought that was very impressive. And then when I put it up on GitHub, I discovered that you had a browsable version of every tech file, at least on the TechLive snapshot, on the Tech Collection snapshots. And that also gave you a URL for every piece of code. And you could even select a range of lines, and then you could have a URL that actually said selected a range of lines. So immediately we've got something that's sort of potentially interesting and useful, which is a browser for tech tech macro files. And all you're doing really is just leveraging what GitHub provides for everybody anyway. So I'm thinking that a project to put TechLive into Git, not in terms of version control, but in terms of pack files usefully presented, has some mileage both in terms of interest and usefulness. And I've got some intention to do that, and I've got a potential name, which is Arxtex, where the arc is with an X. So the object is to be in some sense archival without the heavy overhead of version control. And we want to keep everything small where we can. So it's archival in terms of not the source code being archival, but in terms of allowing the documents to be archival. If we can write an Arxtex that allows archival documents to be more easily created, I think that would be a good thing. I know that Nelson and Hartmut are both well placed to help me if they had more time than they actually had.
Yes, it's actually, as Norbert writes, it goes in so many directions what you would have to do, and you have to touch so many different packages which are maybe even not part of TechLive binaries. It's a daunting task.
I'm thinking of making small progress from small effort. So a specific thing I have in mind is one typesets a document and there's a problem in it, so you want some help with it. So what you do is you make a list of all the inputs, and that's largely done for you already with the minus record option. And for each of those inputs, you create a Git secure hash. And for those inputs for which the secure hash is not already known, you also add to the bundle the file there. So you have the files that go in through their path, the secure hash of each file, and then every file is either in Arxtex or is attached to the bundle. then you may not have the same binaries as somebody else, but at least you can ensure that that you've got the same inputs to the binary as that other person, and there's no longer any doubt that somehow there's been a misconfiguration or a random error to some file somewhere, or picking up the wrong version of a file. But those things are just sort of eliminated. And not only that, but the document then becomes reproducible without having to carry around with it thousands and thousands of style files. So I see that as a step to, sort of proper reproducibility. There's got a lot of problems with it. But I'm seeing that an Arxtex that archives the inputs in terms of style files and fonts is already something that's useful. And
isn't there isn't there actually a LaTeX package which bundles all the styles which you have used in a document? I think there is something like this existing, so for archival purposes. I just don't know the name of it.
If there is, I'd like to know about it. I've got a feeling it lists the version and the names of every file. That's what I suspect, rather
might be
contents themselves. But yeah, in which case, that's something to go on. I've sort of got a focus right now of getting some sort of mastery over the content of Tech Live on a year-to-year basis. And I use the DVDs because they're the simplest and most accessible fixed points we have. So for every Tech Collection DVD, there's a Tech Live. And if we can get those Tech Lives into a series of Git repositories, and the repositories have a reasonable size, then I think that the problem of having the inputs that we need archived becomes much easier somehow than, oh, well, you typeset this document in 2005 and it's got this version of Tech Live. So first of all, you have to get them that DVD, and then you have to unpack it, and then you have to do that, and then you have to do that. It's too hard. I've got a distant vision. It's very important to know where north is if you're trying, and east and west and south. It's very important to know the compass points, even though you're never going to go to the North Pole, the South Pole, and you're never going to walk around the world. And the North Star for me is Knuth's original promise of, or goal, that tech will give it the same results now, 100 years from now, as it does now. And guaranteeing identical inputs should be a lot easier than I think it is. And it has the side effect of making tech distribution much easier because it compacts everything. So most people that install Tech Live already have the previous year's installation made. You already have the previous year's installation. So if one can incrementally add the next year's installation when it arrives, that makes the whole process of upgrading from one version to the next much easier and sort of more straightforward. I sort of have achieved my first goal, which is to get all the style files and so on for the last dozen years into a single Git repository and know how big that Git repository is, and that Git repository is a reasonable size, and simply making use of that thing, or making it available for people to use in ways I haven't thought of, is the next thing I'm interested in. And a lot of exploration is required to know what will be good to do.
How important is the case to hide files from the user? Do you think that you want to go with a monolithic Git pack file and have some accessor to it, or is it still okay to have somewhere on a PC the unpacked files for use?
On Linux, you can have both. The Ubuntu snap system has a snap file system hidden out of the way, and then it's mounted to give something that exists in user space, although most people don't look at it. So on Ubuntu, you can have a great big snapfs. When I say great big, you can have on Ubuntu, you can have a snapfs, which hopefully is about 1/4 of a gigabyte, and that's hidden away, but it's mounted, and it's about 4 gigabytes mounted, even though it's only 1/4 of a gigabyte in reality, which people could browse in the usual way. So this is a bit similar to GitHub. When you browse the TechMF tree, in the TechMF tree that I put up on GitHub, you're not browsing files, you're browsing the pack files. It's just that every time you click on a link, GitHub unpacks whatever it needs to unpack and presents it to you. So well, I've said my piece, and if we have a cautious response, we have a cautious response.